So today in this video we're going to build this forge. Now I do apologize, this is future Dan. I did forget to film a proper intro. So you see here we got this extra bits on the side. Well, the great thing with this forge being a venturi burner and a side blast is that using the forge stand, after you build the simple venturi burner, if you want to upgrade to a forced air, it's very easy to do that. And that build video will also be coming out not long after this build video goes out. So the tools you're going to need for cutting at a minimum, you're going to need a hacksaw, but I recommend an angle grinder. For measuring the length of material, you're going to need a tape measure and a pair of calipers. Digital are easier to use. To mark the holes that you're going to drill, you're going to need a center punch. This one is an automatic center punch. Leave a link in the description to all the tools that I use and recommend. 2 9/16 wrenches. You're also going to need one drill. You're going to require drill bits from 1/8 inch to 1/2 inch. You're also going to need a file or a couple of files to deburr the pieces that you cut. You'll also need a regular rip saw, wood saw, because the soft fire brick is soft enough that you'll be able to cut through with just this. But you want to make sure you use one that you're not going to want to use for wood, because it will dull the blade, because it's a hard, even though it's soft, it is an abrasive material. For tools, you're also just going to need a scrap piece of wood. So when you're cutting the fire brick, if you're using a table that you don't want to cut through or damage, it'll damage this. So you need a piece of scrap plywood. This came from an old drawer. You'll also need one 2-inch or 2 1/4 inch diameter wood cutting hole saw. For PPE, personal protection, you're going to want a good respirator for when you're cutting the metal, and especially when you're cutting the soft fire brick. It can make some really fine dust that you don't want to breathe in. You're going to want a good pair of earmuffs for hearing protection. You're going to want some safety glasses for when you're cutting stuff. But when you're using an angle grinder, I really recommend having a face shield visor. It will give you better protection for your whole face and also a little bit of your neck. You're going to need 2 18 3/4 inch long pieces of 1.5 inch angle iron, 2 9-inch pieces of 1.5 inch angle iron. Then to hold the fire bricks, you're going to need, this is where the fire bricks are going to be staying on, 24 inches long. Then for the top of the fire bricks, where the flat bar touches, you're going to need 2 9-inch long pieces of angle iron. You're also going to need 2 19-inch long pieces of 3/16 by 1.5 inch. You're also going to need you're going to need 6 pieces of all thread, all roughly 13 inches long. You also need one 10-inch piece of 1/8 inch by 1 inch mild steel. You're going to need 12 or 14 lock washers, because the lock washers will add tension and it'll cinch up everything. When you're cutting the all thread, just want to gently put it in a vise or have it clamped. The hacksaw works great. That's the nice thing about this saw, is that you can get right in between the threads. So, shit. To deburr, you can use a file, but I got my belt grinder. Whether you have a 2x72 or 1x30 or 2x42, whatever belt sander you have, you just want to hold it at an angle so that you get a light bevel. There we have a nice taper. It's smooth, it won't cut you. So it does take some elbow grease, but you can cut your pieces using your hacksaw, but I have an angle grinder, so I'm going to use it. You can see how much faster that was. Now if you have any weird small off pieces, you can always use this when you later get a welder which I have a review right up here on this little nice stick welder. You'll be able to make your own jigs using these. Now we got to cut some 3/16 or 1/4 inch if you got it, but I got 3/16 flat bar for the top pieces. This is rather loud, so I would recommend wearing hearing protection when you're cutting with this, but you're gonna see just how nicely this saw cuts through. So you can see in real time, just how fast you're able to cut through mild steel / annealed steel. So if you want to get into knife making, you know, if you don't, and you want to be able to cut your steel, this saw is great. So one of the things you have to take into account when you're measuring with the calipers and figuring out the holes is that your pieces are going to be lined up like this. You're going to have your nut here. You need the hole to be lined up so that you're able to use either the crescent side or this side. So you can use predetermined measurements, or you can also just lay things out. So you're going to have the 9-inch cross pieces. So we're going to take the nut. We see we got room to move, so we'll take our center punch, get it roughly in the center. The only thing I don't like about these is that sometimes they loosen up, so they won't work. So I'm going to measure that. So I'm going to have it marked up at 0.67 from the edge and 0.67 from this edge on the 9-inch. So we'll take the 0.67. You can see that they're all lined up pretty much, which is good. And that's also one of the reasons why you want to have an go from 1/8 inch all the way up to 1/2 inch, because the 1/2 inch will give you some leeway. Now we're going to take our center punch. So one of the things that you can make, if you got nails and some wood, this is for my drill press, but this will double as a way for drilling. So for your angle iron, you're going to need some clamps, so this is some extra tools. I mean, you could just hold it here, which I'm going to give that a try. And we're going to start with the 1/8 inch drill bit. Wasn't too bad, but we're going to go from 1/8 inch to 1/4 inch, then to 3/8, and then to 1/2. Now it's going to be challenging once we get to the 3/8 and 1/2 inch, because this might grab a lot more. So we'll see. So usually it grabs like that just before it breaks through the outer wall. So I'm going to lower the speed. Yeah, I just had to lower the speed. That's a 3/8 inch hole. And you can see our threaded rod. You basically have to twist the thread in order to get it through. And we don't want that because that can damage the threads and also just make it a pain. So we're going to take our 1/2 inch drill bit. We'll see how bad this might be. So that's my turn. I want to start buffering. You don't see one buffer on the bottom. Now it's nicer. But you can see how big that is. You gotta start a nut. Or actually, yeah, I'm a dumbass. Instead of doing what I just did, just have one nut higher Can you take me higher? Gonna put it through there. That way we don't take forever threading stuff, waste our precious time here on God's green earth. And we'll get that on there. It's okay, things are a little bit cattywampus at first, but now we're gonna tighten that. So now we're only gonna tighten the top one because we want this, when you tighten the top one, the threaded bar gets actually sucked up towards the top, so that way you don't worry about so now that's nice and solid, like it'll move, but once we put the other cross piece, it'll be just dandy. I'm still learning how to film stuff, so bear with me, guys. Get it nice and tight. Even if you really break it down, it's not really going to go anywhere. Do it here too. A little more. So now we got the base. Now the hearth is where the bricks are going to go. So you want to make sure this one's right up against it. I'm going to turn these nuts so that the flat sides are right there. That way we have some consistency. Can fit in right here. So I got this roughly mocked up. These hard fire bricks, you can get them from any form of pizza oven supply store or get them online. These are the inch thick ones. But we want this for the bottom, especially if you're going to be doing some forge welding, making Damascus or just forge welding tomahawks and other things. This is 4.5 inch wide brick, and we want this to be a little bit wider. So we're going to have to take some calipers and we're going to take off roughly 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch from the brick with the saw. So we take our Sharpie, have our nut flat against here, we take that. So now all we gotta do is find our calipers. It's 0.67 of an inch from this edge to the here. So we're gonna use that to scribe that, put a center punch. The whole center punch. It's right through my table again, that's fine. We're gonna go into 3/8. And yes, I could use my drill press, but I'm just showing you guys that you can do it. You can do it! Come on up an inch or so. Now, before we get too crazy with all that, we want to put our cross pieces back in. We want to make sure that the fire bricks will fit in here, but we want this to be tight. If you could see, the fire bricks don't quite want to move because these are a little bit in the way. We got the, there we go. We have the flat edge. So now we know that fits. It's not too tight, and if we want this to be a little bit tighter, pushing in, we can always take the wrench, and you can hear it. It's pressing on the bricks. There's gonna be some leeway. Now we can flip our pieces over. And if you can see, it's hard to tell, but we got our scratch lines. So the bolts scratch there, so we're gonna put our center punches there. And then we're gonna build a we're gonna drill a wider hole than 1/2 inch, just so we have some leeway. So now I got them roughly marked using the bolts as a scratching edge. Take our center punch. This is the side the venturi burner is gonna be coming from. So we just take our other piece of 10 inches, 1/8, and we do the same thing. We just go, we kind of just scrape. You can see we kind of have the scratch right there. Put our center punch where that scratch is. This Grizzly drill press I've had for like 5 years. And we do the same for the other third piece. That time that was a lot better. We still have a little bit of an angle, but this doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to work. Luckily I got a friend that'll help me clean this up. All right guys, so I only did a little bit of cleanup because I know that we're still gonna need to do some drilling after we get this clamped together. You want to have the flat side here, but I'm gonna take this hard fire brick that I have from the already done forge. So we got more than enough room, a little bit extra space, a little bit more than I would want. All right guys, I got back. So the brick that we cut, I found out we don't have to have it because this 4.5 inch fire brick, hard fire brick, if we just leave one side normal and then have the cut side, this will fit in just fine. Because I made the mistake of cutting off 1/2 inch on both sides instead of a 1/4 inch, but you'll live and learn. So we do have an extra cut brick. So if this thing eventually breaks, we'll be able to replace it with this cut brick. So just make sure to have it somewhere safe. And before we put the top piece of the top brackets on, we need to put the nuts on. For the little 1/8 inch bar that'll hold the venturi burner. Yeah, these are a little bit struggling because we did kind of chew up the threads a little. So that one doesn't want to turn by hand, so we'll have to take a wrench. Just get it past. Yeah, we definitely marred up the threads on this one. But it doesn't appear to be too bad because I'm able to get past it. If you want. But now that that's like that, I'll be able to put this on. So now on top we have full thickness bricks, and only on one side we have a partially cut brick. So now we have these piece of angle iron, and we got enough of these other bricks to make a hearth. Another mistake I made, I didn't get these bottom pieces. These bottom pieces lined up. So obviously, if you wanted it to be lighter weight, you don't have to have the hearth. But the hearth, you can actually, if you wanted to, you could actually make this design of forge longer. So we're able to fit 2 bricks in the front, 1 brick in the back. And of course, if you wanted to, you don't have to have the hard fire brick there. All right, guys, so now we got these cut. These are gonna be what actually cinch down onto the angle iron. So those are below the line. So now this is what will clamp down. So we're gonna take these nuts. If you want to get a nice even spacing, so you're able to use the top bars as a shelf, we're gonna use 2 nuts underneath. This is why it's really useful to get if you can get like 100 count box of 3/8" nuts, that's great. Now before we put the top plate on, we're gonna tighten the bottom nuts just a little bit. Doesn't have to be super tight, we just want it so that nothing's moving. And we're just gonna back it off just a little bit, because when the forge heats up, it will expand. Kind of playing a game of tension here, because if things are off a little bit. So we went to 1/2 inch, but because we got too much, once we added the bars on the bottom, it kind of changed the dynamic of everything. I'm just trying to take these off without. So we're just gonna have to step up a size and drill bit. So even though we made a mistake, we were able to drill that extra hole, so now everything will fit nicely. All right, guys, so before we drill, I gotta take this apart. This cross piece that'll hold the venturi burner, the holes need to be drilled bigger because right now we can't really slide it up and down without marring up the threads. So we're gonna do that. Gonna drill this. All right, got these drilled, and it's much better. You don't want to drill too big or else it won't sit on the nuts. So now we're gonna drill the side, but you have to keep in mind, if you're making this style of forge and you don't want to have the hard fabric in there and you're willing to ruin the bottom or you're going to put some casting refractory. You can drill the hole lower, but because I'm going to be able to get more of these hard fire bricks, I'm going to drill the hole higher. And even if you take this fire brick out, it will still heat up the forge. It'll just, the hot spot will be higher, but you're definitely going to want to put a respirator on because it's going to get dusty. As you can see by the yellow paint wearing off from this, we don't quite have enough depth. Not the first time any of us guys have been told that. So what we got to do, we're just going to have to chisel some of this so we can get more depth. Alright guys, so now that we have that drilled out, you are going to have to use a little hammer and road spike or something to chisel out stuff so you can get more depth. Unless you have a long enough hole saw, but they usually don't make them super deep. Because these are thick bricks, they're like 3 inches thick. So now that we got that, we're gonna see how well our venturi burner works. So this one, as you can see, this is from our build videos. So I've used this a few times to make stuff. But we're gonna see now this venturi burner, the outer diameter of this is more than the hole that we have, because this is a 2 1/8 hole saw. If you have 2 1/4 inch, that would be better, but I just didn't have that. But the good thing we can do is that you can see how it just barely fits. But this fire brick is soft enough where you can actually use the venturi burner itself as a boring tool. But before we do that, we're going to raise this bar a little. Yeah, we want it so that the body of the burner is essentially nice and perpendicular. And you're using the actual venturi burner head as like a boring tool. So you can actually see in there, we actually are opening the hole a little bit more. So you just want to take your time with this. You don't want to break the brick. Now we want the majority of this bell to be inside the brick. And it's okay if you kind of wobble this around to get a little bit more clearance, because this is going to expand. It's going to get orange hot or hotter than that, and it's going to expand. So if you just kind of gently wiggle it around. So now we got the majority of it in there. There's still a little bit of gap there. That'll be just fine. Now to fix this, first we need to get these nuts. We're just gonna go a little bit further in. We have to tilt it up a little bit just because of this lip here. We're gonna fix this to this plate. If you wanted to, you could forge like a bracket this could go onto. But one of the cheaper and easier ways is you can just use some iron plumbing wire. So you want to make a loop. I want to pull it. I'm gonna use this groove for advantage. And you can twist this if you want. Kind of help lock things in place. You can see it doesn't really want to go anywhere, which is good. It's nice and simple because we're using this groove. It doesn't want to move. We can rotate it still, but it's not going to slide around much. Now, before we move this to the forge stand, which check out, I'll leave a link in the description to this build video. This is from like over a year ago, but this is fully bolted together. You can get the majority of the angle iron if you go get like free bed frames. A lot of times they are made from heavy duty angle iron, especially if they're older. You just got to get yourself the 16 by 24 inch top plate, which is just 1/8 inch smiled steel. But because you have those pieces of angle iron that go across, it actually reduces the flex by a lot. But before you do that, you want to make sure that these are all tight against each other, because I have dropped a previous version of this forge before trying to move it. So you could use lock washers, but if you have the nuts tightened against each other, and these bars will actually kind of flex, so they kind of act like their own spring. She's a bit heavier than the little one I had before, but she is worth it. Of course, if you wanted this rotated, you could have it oriented a different way, but I just like this setup for now. All right, guys, now to hook up the venturi burner to the stainless steel hose, this gas line, if you look here, it has a rubber gasket, so we want to make sure that there's nothing, no crap in there, nothing. We want to make sure that that's in, because these hoses are great, but if had these rubbers fall out and then your forge get pregnant, and it's not a good time. Make sure that's in there. You just want to start this by hand first and get as hand tight as we can get it. Now you get your adjustable wrench and hold your venturi burner. This is why having the valve where it is nice, because it gives you some leverage. Don't have to kill it, just has to be nice and tight. Now to start this forge, if you use the stainless steel hose that I'm going to leave a link in the description, this is a 12-foot stainless steel hose. First you make sure the valve is at 90 perpendicular to the line, so 90 degrees, so that means it's off. You're going to turn the main valve on the tank on, and then on this regulator, the high pressure regulator, you turn to the right, so clockwise, and that opens the valve. I'm going to bring it up to 10 psi to christen this forge. Now you want to have your eye protection on, so turn your torch on. You can have a piece of paper or a match in here. I like using a torch because it doesn't let embers, it doesn't create any form of flammable material that can float up into your wooden rafters or float somewhere you don't want it to. So we're going to light the torch, and then turn the valve. All right, guys, thank you for making it to the end of the video. Again, I really apologize for this taking forever. It's on me. I'm sorry. I should have had this done out sooner. But if you guys have any questions, make sure to leave comments down below. Now, this is not cheaper than buying a forge, but you gain the skills and knowledge on how to build this, and you know what extra parts you need, so if anything breaks, you can replace it. Because planned obsolescence is a bunch of bullcrap. So knowing how to make something, and it gives you ideas on how to make stuff in the future. Now, the next video on forge building will be how to convert this into what you see currently, which is a 4-stair forge using the forge stand, which I'll leave the links in the description to the video on how to make this forge stand. Again, thank you guys so much for watching the video. And also, we now have YouTube membership, so we're monetized on that. So if you want to help out the channel, besides subscribing and sharing and watching my videos, I have different tiers, and everyone will be entered to win a monthly giveaway of, you know, a forged axe or knife or other things that you guys get to vote on in the live stream comments and polls. So again, thank you guys. Remember, be safe, have fun, make some cool stuff, and forge on.